Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere warm, dry, and just a little bit musty. You're stepping into ancient Thebes. Yes, that Thebes at a time when the streets were dusty, the sun beat down on mud brick walls, and the scent of river water baking bread and faintly sour tunics floated through the air. But don't worry, you're not headed for battle or pharaoh drama. No, you're here for something far less glamorous and far more relatable. Laundry. That's right, tonight you'll spend a quiet, unhurried evening walking through the sudsy corners of Egyptian civilization, following piles of sweat-soaked linen, tugging apart pleats, peeking into wash tubs, and maybe trying not to trip over the laundry line. And trust me, you probably wouldn't survive a week of this life. The heat brutal, the detergent highly questionable, the gossip unforgiving. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a narrow alleyway, the air warm against your skin, the scent of Nile silt and dry reeds brushing past your nose. Somewhere nearby, a wooden ladle clinks against a stone basin, and you catch the soft thwap-thwap of fabric being beaten against a flat surface. You've arrived at the edge of Thebes, and night is just beginning to roll in over the desert horizon. Laundry in ancient Egypt is not a chore, it's a ritual, an industry, a way of life. The courtyard you enter is framed by low mud brick walls, its surface swept clean except for a few scattered palm fronds and a sleeping dog curled in the shade. A large clay basin sits in the middle, half filled with cloudy water that's been hauled bucket by bucket from the river. A woman kneels beside it, her fingers red and puckered from hours of scrubbing. You nod to her. She does not look up. There's no washing machine here, no button to push, no gentle cycle, just muscle rhythm and a lot of patience. The linen you see draped across the edge of the basin is thick and coarse, basic workers' cloth, pale from countless rinses. It's woven from flax harvested in the hotter months and spun slowly by hand into tight, even threads. Some tunics are bleached by sun and age, others stained faintly at the edges, the record of long days spent hauling stone, grinding grain, or baking bread in a furnace-hot kitchen. Linen for Egyptians is the only fabric that matters. Cotton hasn't arrived yet, and wool is considered unclean. You don't really want to know what happens to someone who shows up in wool at the temple. Historians still argue whether linen's dominance came purely from climate or whether deeper religious taboos helped push other fabrics out of fashion. What's clear is that the flax fields were more precious than they looked and more water-hungry than most outsiders realized. Laundry is done in the early evening after the main heat of the day has passed. The washerwomen, usually women, though some men take on the task in temple precincts, work in teams. One rinses, one scrubs, one wrings, and another might be responsible for laying garments out to dry, neatly folded or pegged with simple wooden pins to reed ropes stretched between walls. The water is rarely clean, the Nile is generous but muddy, and unless you're rich enough to boil it first or toss in some crushed natron, you make do with what the crocodiles leave behind. You pause at a stack of folded cloth beside a woven palm fiber basket. Some of the garments are tiny child-sized kilts with a faint blue stripe. Others are long, ceremonial-looking, with stitched borders and embroidered anklets. There's no embroidery machine here. Every thread you see was pulled by a person, possibly someone with sore eyes and a sore back. And the smell, not bad, honestly. Earthy. A little sour, yes, but nowhere near what you feared. It turns out that natron used for everything from cleaning teeth to preserving mummies is surprisingly effective as a deodorizer. You run a finger over a drying tunic and feel the stiffness. These clothes don't come out soft and cozy. They air dry under a desert sun and end up with the texture of lightly toasted parchment. A rooster crows in the distance. A child darts past barefoot laughing, chased by a dog who is clearly winning. You smile. The rhythm of the evening continues. Laundry is done communally here. It's social. People gather as they wash, swapping stories, muttering complaints, occasionally singing short repetitive songs to pass the time. You catch a snatch of one something about a donkey, a market, and a very unfaithful jar of beer. You're not sure you understand the joke, but everyone laughs. There are rules, of course. You don't mix sacred linens with everyday tunics, and you definitely don't touch a priest's robe unless you have permission. In fact, some robes are only handled with special tongs to preserve their ritual purity, or maybe just to avoid an angry temple attendant chasing you down the street. You begin to notice the little rituals. The way each piece of cloth is inspected for tears, carefully folded, smoothed by hand. The way the water is changed at least once despite the labor. The way one of the women mutters a short phrase, maybe a blessing, maybe a curse before wringing out the final garment of the evening. You blink slowly, the air is cooling now. Somewhere behind you a jug is being tipped. You hear water splash into a clay bowl. Someone yawns. Laundry in ancient Egypt is dirty, detailed, sacred, and strangely soothing. And you're just getting started. You shuffle forward, sand crunching softly beneath your feet until the scent of river silt sharpens. You're heading toward the Nile's edge now, where most of the washing happens. The washerwomen of Thebes, some with infants tied snugly to their backs, crouch along the muddy bank, dipping cloth into the current, and wringing it out with practiced flicks of the wrist. The breeze carries the sound of water slapping against stone and the soft hiss of distant reeds. There's no illusion of privacy here. Laundry is very much a public act. That tunic you're trying to wring out, half the neighborhood probably knows what stained it, and while some people haul their clothes closer to town wells, the Nile remains the most popular if chaotic laundry venue. As you crouch beside one of the washwomen, you can't help but notice her hands. They're cracked raw in places, the knuckles rubbed red from years of pounding linen against stone slabs. She works with a rhythmic determination, dunking and smacking, like she's pounding out a beat only she can hear. Her palms are her tools, no brushes, no bristled scrubbers, just skin muscle and some very dedicated fingers. The stones themselves are worn smooth from centuries of use round flat things embedded in the riverbank or dragged closer to the water during the dry season. They glisten now in the fading sun, each one a silent witness to uncounted tunics and headcloths and loin wraps being mercilessly beaten against their backs. The technique might look primitive, but it's more effective than you'd guess. Ancient linen fibers are surprisingly sturdy, and the pounding helps break down grime, worked deep into the weave. Still, there's a fine line between clean enough for the afterlife and oops, ripped another one. Historians still debate whether these washerwomen were paid enslaved or part of a community rotation. Records mention both free labor and temple-bound servants, and it's likely the answer was a mix depending on your status, your gods, and your zip code. Nearby, a boy, maybe 10 years old, is attempting to help his mother. He's ankle-deep in the Nile holding what appears to be a very grumpy goose and a surprisingly stained tunic. You blink. Yes, the goose is trying to eat the tunic. His mother is yelling, the goose is unfazed. You try not to laugh. You fail. Upstream, another washer has laid out strips of linen on flat rocks to dry. These aren't just any rocks, they've been chosen carefully. They're positioned perfect for catching the evening sun. Some even have shallow grooves carved into them, possibly for runoff, possibly for convenience, possibly the accidental art of centuries of scrubbing. One woman uses her own hair tied up in thick braids to secure two corners of a drying shawl. It flutters gently as she sings. The tune sounds ancient and soft, like it might have been passed from mother to daughter across 1,000 generations. You catch a few words, something about linen as white as moonlight, and never trust a man with dusty sandals. Fair advice. The Nile, for all its bounty, isn't the cleanest source. Some washerfolk prefer to haul water in clay jars back to the courtyard basins you saw earlier. But for bulk loads, this is where the real business happens. The river is wide, brown, and slow-moving. It smells of siltfish and something you decide not to identify. Still, there's something hypnotic about the way it moves, the way the light dances on its surface, the way frogs trill just out of sight. Washing clothes here is an act of balance between cleanliness and contamination, between community and solitude, between ritual and routine. You feel the tension in it, the importance. A priest's robe can't have a spot. A bride's veil must glow in the sun. A servant's tunic, even if patched, must be free of grease before temple festivals. Reputation rides on these things. And yet there are moments of levity, too. A cluster of girls are teasing one another, flicking water droplets as they rinse cloths with exaggerated flair. One mock scolds the others for letting a kilt lose its dignity, and they collapse in laughter. You grin. Dignity here is a surprisingly washable thing. Someone nearby mutters a short prayer before beginning her final rinse of the day. You catch the words, clean hands, clean life. It's unclear whether that's spiritual advice or laundry philosophy, but either way, you nod along. Among all the clamor, one woman stands apart. She's older, gray-haired, bent slightly at the spine, but with a gaze sharp enough to slice linen. Her station is organized, her fabrics meticulously laid out, her rhythm deliberate. Everyone gives her space, respect. Maybe she was once a temple washer. Maybe she's just the best launderer on this side of the Nile. No one dares ask. She doesn't need to speak. Her folding technique speaks volumes. As you watch, she finishes wringing out a long garment and lays it over a reed mat to dry. Then with a slow, almost ceremonial gesture, she sprinkles a pinch of natron over it. You blink. Why to purify, to deodorize, to keep flies away? Historians still argue over the true purpose of natron in daily hygiene, though its magical connotations in funerary practices are well recorded. The breeze lifts slightly, rustling the dry grasses. The light grows pink, and still the women scrub, rinse, beat, fold, smooth. The river glows in the twilight. A goose honks in the distance. The boy yells. His tunic is still not dry. The goose remains unimpressed. You take a deep breath. Laundry by the Nile is a sensory symphony, equal parts ritual labor and the occasional waterfowl disaster. And the night is just beginning. You're back in the courtyard now, the Nile behind you, its echoes softened by distance and walls of sun-baked brick. Someone has lit a small oil lamp and its glow flickers gently across a wall, covered in scratches, writing maybe. Or doodles. You move closer and squint. It's an ostracon, a flat chip of limestone or pottery used as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of scrap paper. On it, you make out scribbled lines, names, short notes, and what appears to be a laundry list. Not a metaphorical one, a literal inventory of dirty clothes. Someone centuries ago needed to remember which linens to wash and who they belong to. You trace your finger under a column of symbols. There's the word for tunic for loincloth, a mark that might mean small stain, and another you suspect stands for do not boil. Even back then they had laundry labels. Sort of. Laundry in ancient Egypt was not only personal, it was bureaucratic. Temples, estates, and large households kept records of which garments were in circulation. You didn't just toss your robe in a pile and hope for the best. You accounted for it. You logged the color, the weave, the owner. Some texts even suggest penalties for losing or damaging specific items. Historians still debate the formality of these records. Were they standard practice or reserved for elites and temples? Were these lists checked weekly, monthly, or was it all as chaotic as your own laundry basket? What's certain is that fabric mattered. Linen didn't come cheap, and losing a tunic meant more than an awkward day at the office. It might mean a reprimand, or worse, a deduction from your grain ration. You watch as a young girl, probably no more than 12, crosses the courtyard, balancing a stack of garments almost as tall as she is. Her bare feet slap softly against the stone floor. She sets the bundle down beside an older woman who's meticulously sorting it into smaller piles. Not by color, not by owner, but by dirtiness. It's oddly scientific. The least soiled items, probably worn once, maybe twice, go in one pile. These will get a light rinse. The next batch, thicker stains and deeper creases, are destined for a full soak and scrub. The final pile. Those are the disasters. You know the ones. Oil spills, wine splashes, someone's sweaty under tunic from a day building a grain silo in 42-degree heat. That one gets a look of pure dread. And then comes the sorting of ownership. In wealthier homes, garments are stitched with discrete colored threads, a kind of proto-laundry tag system. Red for the eldest son, blue for temple staff, green for a wife's ceremonial robes. In some places, you might even find names written directly on cloth using ink made from soot and gum arabic. A temporary solution, but handy when half the family wears the same tunic style. One fragment of writing from Deir el-Medina records a dispute where two workers argued over ownership of a particularly well-worn kilt. The matter was only settled when a scribe found a faded name stitched into the hem, just as it seems was hem deep. You sit down on a low stone ledge, the surface still warm from the day's heat. Someone offers you a clay cup water mixed with a bit of date syrup, sweet, earthy gritty between your teeth. You sip slowly as the rhythm of the courtyard continues. Near the wall, a young scribe is consulting another ostrakhan. He reads names aloud, Keti, Jehuti, Beneret. As he reads each, a washer picks up a tunic from the corresponding pile and examines it. One kilt is returned, too damaged to bother with. Another is rolled tightly and tossed into a basin for overnight soaking. You hear the word Nesubit whispered in awe, a royal title. A sacred garment has appeared. It's handled with reverence, the washer covering her mouth with her hand before touching it. The fabric is whiter, finer, and noticeably longer. Maybe it belonged to a minor official, maybe to a priest, or maybe someone's cousin borrowed it for a wedding. We'll never know. Another girl is tallying repaired items. There's a chalked-up board with lines and notches. Every patch sewn adds a mark. Too many marks. Time to retire the robe or cut it down for children's wear. Nothing is wasted. An old tunic becomes a loin wrap. A torn headscarf becomes a rag for cleaning oil lamps. Even the smallest strips of linen can be used to wrap amulets to pad sandals, or somewhat ominously as wicks for lamps. The economics of linen are quietly impressive. A single garment might pass through a dozen hands, be washed and rewashed, patched, resized, repurposed, and eventually buried with its final owner. You wonder how many ghostly tunics now lie beneath the sand, too threadbare to see the afterlife, but too useful to forget. The air grows cooler. Lamps flicker along the walls, now casting shadows that stretch and sway like ghostly laundry lines. You lean back slightly, eyes half-lidded, and listen. 10 tunics, 3 loincloths, 1 ceremonial robe. Too much oil on this one. Whose cousin did this? Wash again, smells like fish. It's beautiful in a strange domestic way. So much effort, so much record keeping just to keep cloth clean. And yet the rhythm of it is calming, predictable, honest. Someone chuckles near you, holding up a tunic with a hole the size of a cat's head. This one, she says, fought a goat and lost. No one questions it. They've all been there. A dog walks by tail, wagging a sock of unknown origin in its mouth. Nobody tries to stop it. The night deepens. The list is checked once more. The piles are rearranged, and one final garment folded just so is laid atop a stone as though waiting for a pharaoh to step into it. You close your eyes. The washing may be done, but the sorting never ends. The next morning arrives not with a blaring alarm clock, but with the dry whisper of reed brooms sweeping dust from doorsteps, and the hollow clink of pottery lids being lifted from morning water jars. You stir awake on a woven mat in the corner of the same courtyard, the air cooler now touched by the faintest thread of breeze from the river. But even before the sun fully crests the horizon, there's movement. The linen must be ready. A pair of temple attendants enter the courtyard, their shaven heads gleaming in the half-light, their linen kilts startlingly white. You blink. How do they keep it that white? Surely it can't be natural. They're here to collect garments for the temple. These aren't just any clothes, these are the daily robes of the gods. In ancient Egyptian religious practice, statues of deities were treated like living beings. Every morning, they were awakened, bathed, perfumed, and yes, dressed in clean clothes, often several times a day. Amun didn't settle for one outfit. The gods had entire wardrobes, and those garments had to be laundered, folded, stored, and rotated with more care than even the pickiest mother-in-law's guest linens. You glance at the folded stack prepared by the head washer. These robes are almost translucent, the weave so fine they ripple like water when lifted. Their scent is faintly mineral laced with the earthy crispness of natron. No perfume, no artificial additives, just cleanliness elevated to ritual. Historians still argue whether the same robe was reused after each temple dressing or whether fresh ones were made constantly. Some texts imply the finest items were never rewashed at all, but buried as offerings once worn. One robe in the pile glints subtly with threads of gold. Another has a stitched falcon near the hem, a mark of Horus. They are handled with long reed tongs never touched by bare hands. You watch as the attendants carefully roll them, cradle them in basket trays, and bow before leaving. Once they're gone, the atmosphere shifts. There's a collective exhale and someone mutters, "Back to normal clothes. Thank the gods." Now it's time to prepare for the second kind of customer, the truly mortal kind. You follow the washerwoman toward a back chamber where another batch of clothes waits. This one's less intimidating tunics worn by scribes' aprons crusted with flour from temple kitchens, and a few suspiciously wine-stained shawls from last night's festival. The divine might demand spotless robes, but the rest of the world, mostly just less smelly, will do. She grabs a shallow basket and heads to a corner where bowls of cleaning agents are lined up like a potion maker's shelf. There's no bar soap here, no bubbly foam, no lemon-scented detergent, but what they have is oddly effective, and just a little revolting. First, there's natron, a blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate harvested from dry lake beds. You've seen it in use already, but now you watch as it's mixed with a paste of ash and crushed chalk, forming a lumpy beige goo that smells like dust and vinegar. She dips her fingers in and scoops a blob onto a heavily stained tunic, rubbing it gently into the cloth. This is the Egyptian version of spot treatment, and while it lacks the peppermint freshness of modern stain, sticks it works eventually. Next comes urine. Yes, human. The ammonia content makes it an effective cleanser. You're politely told to stand back while this batch is handled. You oblige, gladly. Then there's sour beer added not to drink away the pain of doing laundry, but because its acidity helps break down grime. It's used sparingly, though, likely because it's too valuable to waste on tunics unless they've truly offended the gods. One washer drops a small clay jar and it shatters. A dark liquid spills onto the stone floor and everyone lets out a groan. That was the last of the good paste someone sighs. You offer to help clean it up. They laugh. You're a guest, they say. We can't curse guests with laundry luck. You suspect laundry luck is a real thing here. Maybe a deity, maybe just a superstition, but it matters. A tall man enters the courtyard now. He's shirtless, his chest dusted with limestone powder, his hands calloused and wrapped in linen strips. A quarry worker. He lays down a bundle of tunic's boughs to the head washer and drops a small payment, 3 dried figs, and a chipped amulet into a reed tray. Payment isn't always coin here. Sometimes it's grain, sometimes fish, sometimes favors. The washerwoman nods approvingly. The figs are fresh enough. His tunics are stiff with sweat and dust. You help unfold one and recoil slightly. It smells like effort and sunburn. Still, the washerwoman handles it like anything else. Soak, scrub, wring, rinse. You notice that even in this dirty work, there's a sense of rhythm of purpose. Her hands move with grace like she's performing a ritual. Maybe she is. To keep people clothed, to keep society neat is no small thing. Laundry is maintenance. Laundry is order. And in a civilization obsessed with mayat balance and harmony, what's more important than keeping the fabric of daily life clean? The sun is rising now, its heat climbing quickly. The courtyard shadows retreat. Already clean garments flap gently on drying lines, their whiteness catching the light, their pleats crisp, their edges smooth. A cat stretches lazily beneath the hanging cloth, yawns, and returns to sleep. Another day of laundry has begun, and somehow it's peaceful. You're crouched beside a washerwoman, now hands wet the fabric slippery beneath your fingers. She's handed you a basic worker's kilt to scrub coarse linen, dyed a pale ochre by years of sun and sweat and sand. You try to mimic her motion, fold, press, rub, dunk. The cloth slaps into the basin like a fish sending up a splash that soaks your elbows. She chuckles, but says nothing. You're learning that washing like a worker isn't about brute strength, it's about rhythm, weight distribution, the angle of your wrist as you knead the grime out of pleats. Your arms burn after just a few minutes, and this is one kilt. Imagine dozens, daily. For laborers in ancient Egypt, quarrymen, farmers, scribes who sat sweating in clay-walled huts all day, clothing was minimal but well used. A single garment might rotate across weeks, and it had to be scrubbed regularly, not for appearance, but for hygiene. There's no deodorant here, no washing machines humming in the corner, just a dusty courtyard soapless grit and the occasional cry of a startled ibis. Laundry for workers wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about status, however minor. A freshly laundered tunic could mean the difference between a temple job and being sent back to the reed fields. You couldn't walk into an audience with a regional official looking like you slept in a fish basket. Which, to be fair, some people probably did. One man nearby is rinsing his own clothes, likely a lower status worker without access to family or hired help. His technique is enthusiastic. You watch as he hurls his linen into the basin like he's banishing evil spirits. The woman beside you smirks. He must have argued with his wife again, she murmurs. The detergent he's using smells different. It's darker, more pungent. When you ask, your washerwoman tells you it's a mix of date wine, stale barley paste, and crushed beans. For heavy jobs, she says, wrinkling her nose, and very bad tempers. Historians still debate how standardized ancient detergents were. Recipes differ from town to town, household to household. Some relied heavily on natron, others on more agricultural ingredients, whatever was cheap, whatever scrubbed well, whatever masked the smell. There are even references to using mashed sycamore figs, though modern scholars suspect that was more of a desperate last resort. You reach for another garment in the pile, a long tunic with an oddly high collar and a tear along the side. It's been patched before. You can see the cross-stitch marks. Some poor soul probably wore this to work at a granary, took a fall, and kept wearing it anyway. Mending, not discarding, is the rule here. Cloth is precious. Throwing it out, practically a sin. One young woman walks past holding what looks like a net full of rags. But they're not rags. They're work-specific cloths, strips tied around the forehead to catch sweat, others meant to wrap tool handles, and some used to protect exposed skin from sun or wind. These get washed just like everything else, carefully sorted and hung out to dry. You're beginning to see how much laundry goes beyond clothing. It's gear, it's equipment, it's daily armor, and every piece matters. A goat wanders into the courtyard. No one seems surprised. It pauses beside a drying line and sniffs at a nearly white loincloth before losing interest and walking out again. Crisis averted. Behind you, a few children are laughing as they stomp linen into a wide basin, feet replacing fists in a playful take on washing. It's not standard practice, but hey, it works. Their little souls press the cloth down, twist, lift, dunk again. A form of laundry dancing you suspect only kids can get away with. You ask about the drying process for worker clothes. Surely it's not all done under sun-drenched lines like the finer items. The washerwoman nods and gestures to a separate rack behind a low wall. It's more utilitarian long rods of wood balanced between uprights, where garments hang loose, not clipped. Some lie flat on reed mats, soaking up heat from the ground. In the busy season, some even dry on rooftops, though you're told that's risky if you live near thieving monkeys. You laugh, but the look she gives you is entirely serious. By now you've begun to recognize the feel of clean linen. It's lighter even if it's still damp. It smells faintly of ash and river silt, and the way it folds in your hands crisper, more obedient than when it was saturated with dust and sweat. You help fold a freshly cleaned tunic and try to mimic the precise way she tucks the corners in. You fail. It looks more like a rolled-up tortilla than a garment. She fixes it wordlessly. Laundry for the working class is never ending. There's no laundry day. It's every day. Clothes are washed as needed when time permits, when there's water, when the sun is strong. Sometimes garments are rinsed and worn still damp. One woman admits she often lays her tunic on a flat rock in the sun during lunch, turns it once, and puts it back on by the time her bread is done baking. That's the thing about this kind of life. It's resourceful, it's practical, it bends around heat time availability. No luxury cycles here, just survival neatly folded. As the morning warms and the piles of clean cloth grow higher, you feel the tide of activity begin to swell. Men arrive to collect tunics. Children bring bundles wrapped in reeds. One woman hands off a robe to an elderly neighbor who examines it and nods satisfied. No praise. Just the understanding that for now, one corner of their lives is in order. And you're tired, your fingers are pruned, your knees ache from crouching. But there's something deeply calming about this rhythm. Something that makes the noise of the modern world melt away like spilled natron in a sunlit basin. Fold, press, rinse, hang, one cloth at a time. You've barely caught your breath from the morning rush when a boy appears at the edge of the courtyard, panting and clutching something wrapped in faded linen. Palace laundry, he gasps, and just like that, everyone straightens their backs. You turn your head curious. The palace. It's not a term thrown around lightly. Laundry from the royal household doesn't arrive every day, and when it does, it's handled with the kind of reverence normally reserved for sacred scrolls or birthday cakes in households with more children than slices. The bundle is unwrapped, carefully revealing layers of thin, impossibly smooth linen robes. You can see the difference instantly. This isn't worker cloth. This is elite textile craftsmanship with a weave so tight and consistent you'd think it was poured instead of loomed. The head washer, an older woman with a back as stiff as a temple pillar, calls for silence. She inspects each piece slowly, holding it up to the light, checking for tear stains or signs of misuse. Her lips press into a line as she spots a pale yellow blotch near the collar of a tunic. Grape mash, she mutters. Again. One of the younger women giggles, then quickly hides it behind a cough. The head washer doesn't break her stare. Handling royal garments is a complicated dance. Not only must they be washed delicately, they must also be returned with the illusion of never having been worn. Smooth, fragrant, perfect. The kind of perfection only possible if you ignore how dusty and sweaty this country gets on a regular basis. The detergent blend changes immediately. No bean paste or sour beer here. Instead, the washer mixes crushed lotus petals with warm water, a pinch of natron, and a few drops of cedar oil. The scent is subtle woody with a note of floral crispness. Expensive, too. One drop too many and someone could lose a week's wages. You watch as she soaks a strip of linen in the mixture and gently daubs it along the inside of the collar. No scrubbing. Just a slow, rhythmic press of cloth against cloth, easing out the residue of courtly excess. Historians still argue whether these garments were standardized across all royal households, or if different palaces had preferred weaves, dyes, or ritual laundering methods. Some records suggest Pharaoh's own robes were never washed at all, used once, then buried or burned, but others point to detailed laundry logs from palace scribes, tracking the condition and rotation of each item. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the folds. You inch closer and catch sight of embroidery along the edge of a tunic, tiny falcons with their wings outstretched, each one just half a thumb's width in size. These weren't stitched by machine, obviously. Somewhere a human hand placed every thread, looped every corner, tied every knot. You try to imagine the hours that took, then the hours it took to sweat in it, then the responsibility of cleaning it. Suddenly your own laundry at home feels like child's play. A girl is assigned to smoothing duties. She lays each cleaned robe flat on a heated basalt slab, gently pressing it with a curved piece of polished wood. There's no iron here, just friction and focus. She works in silence, flipping the cloth, smoothing the corners, her hands moving with the precision of someone who's done this 1,000 times, maybe more. The garments are then folded not into squares, but into long, ribbon-like folds meant to avoid creases in the wrong places. One robe is so fine it's nearly transparent, like a shimmer of moonlight wrapped in nothing. She whispers something as she lays it down. You lean in. To look clean is to be clean, she says, almost like a mantra. Another helper brings out cedar-lined baskets padded with reeds and layered with fresh linen cloths to cushion the clean garments. Everything has to look effortless, even though it's the opposite. A scribe arrives not long after reed pen tucked behind one ear and begins to tally the returned items. He doesn't speak to anyone. He just counts scratches marks onto a thin board covered in inked symbols and nods once. One robe doesn't pass. A faint red mark near the hem. Possibly wine, possibly something worse. It's set aside to be treated again. That robe will now undergo a deeper cleaning, and it can't be done here. You're told it must be taken to the temple compound's ritual laundering facility, a sacred spring, a moon priest, possibly a blessing involving incense and goat milk. No one's quite sure. The phrase "just get it clean" doesn't really apply when it comes to royalty. A pair of servants' barefoot heads bowed arrive to collect the finished garments. They say nothing, lift the baskets, and leave as quietly as they came. You exhale, the tension lifts. Someone makes a joke about whether Pharaoh would notice if a washer wore his robe for a second. The answer is probably, and also definitely not worth the risk. The washerwoman rolls her next size and reaches for the next kilt. Ordinary linen, a little dusty, a tear near the pocket. You can feel the whole courtyard relax again, back to normal. Washing royal clothes may carry prestige, but most of the workers here would rather scrub wine-stained aprons than spend their day worrying about whether the sun dried a crease into a ceremonial robe. You lean back, letting the sounds of splashing and ringing fill your ears again. There's something comforting about returning to the basics. Back to sleeves with frayed hems and kilts that smell like the inside of a storage jar. Royalty might rule the land, but it's the everyday garments that keep the gears of life turning and keep the laundry basins full. You blink slowly as the courtyard hums back into its usual rhythm, now free from the ceremonial pressure of royal laundry. The head washer has returned to her stool, wringing out a thick work tunic with fingers that seem stronger than most people's biceps. Around you, bundles are being reshuffled, water is being refreshed, and the smell of fresh linen floats softly in the air, warm and starchy. But it's not all sunshine and linen here. One glaring mystery still looms in your mind. How in the name of Ra did an entire civilization manage to wash this much cloth without soap? You lean against the wall, rubbing your hands together, still a bit raw from your earlier failed attempt at scrubbing. You ask the washerwoman beside you point blank, "So, what did they use?" She gives you a grin, one that says, "Oh, sweet child," and reaches behind her basket to show you the star of the show, natron. Again, it's gritty, powdery, and smells like ancient chalk. And yet this humble substance is the cornerstone of not just Egyptian cleaning, but medicine, embalming, and the occasional household pest control. She tells you that natron wasn't the only thing they used. Sometimes wood ash was added for extra alkalinity. Sometimes a chalky mixture from dried river mud did the trick. And if you were truly out of options, fermented fruit, particularly sour grapes or overripe dates, would be mashed and rubbed into the fabric to help lift oils. You squint. That can't smell good. She snorts. You want good, go pray to Bess for new clothes. Historians still debate whether natron was truly effective as a detergent or whether it simply masked smells while drying the fibers out. What's clear is that it was ritually important. Using natron was not just about function, it was about purity, which in ancient Egypt was a big deal. Purity meant access. You couldn't enter a temple if your clothes were unclean. You couldn't conduct business attend rituals or even participate in some markets if your linen wasn't at least reasonably presentable. Some texts hint at social judgments based entirely on how crunchy your tunic sounded when you walked. That's not a joke. Crunchy clothes, stasher not rinsed well, stas poor character. You're handed a cloth that's just come out of the rinse. It's stiff, like wooden scroll stiff. You gently wave it and hear a faint rustle like wind through papyrus. Welcome to the reality of soapless laundering. To combat this, many Egyptians turned to what you might call post-wash rituals. These included palm smoothing, pressing the fabric flat with warm hands or rolling stones, oil polishing, wiping the outer layer of ceremonial robes with a minuscule amount of scented oil, not enough to stain, just enough to keep the fibers from turning into fabric crackers. Sun folding, allowing garments to sun-dry in specific folds so they'd hold shape and appear neatly creased without heat pressing. You watch now as a woman takes one such robe and lays it accordion style across a row of stones. She smooths it with her forearm, one crease at a time. No steam, no starch, just sun and skill. Another washer is busy reweaving a frayed sleeve with linen thread stripped from an old curtain. Recycling was more than eco-friendly here, it was economic survival. Cloth took time, labor, and resources to produce. Throwing it away because of a single tear was seen as both foolish and ungrateful. You glance around and realize something else: there's very little waste. Dirty rinse water is scooped into smaller basins and reused to pre-soak the next batch. Broken reed pins are dried and burned. Even shredded linen ends are bundled and used as lamp wicks or stuffing for sandals. The concept of a laundry bin here is an insult. Everything has a second life. You try your hand at smoothing again. A young girl gives you a polite smile, then gently corrects your wrist angle. You press down like you're angry, she says. Press like the cloth just confessed something. You grin, noted. Across the courtyard, someone stirs a small clay pot of crushed mint and myrrh. The scent wafts gently, meant to freshen the air or perhaps mask whatever came off the last batch of clothes. The mix is also used sparingly to perfume headscarves or pillow cloths in wealthier homes. Fabric wasn't often dyed in daily garments, but some washerfolk specialized in brightening. They'd use safflower petals for a pale yellow tint or pomegranate skins to bring out soft tan tones. Nothing garish, just enough to suggest freshness. At the edge of the courtyard, pinned to a line with carved wooden pegs, is a special robe. It's wide pleated and noticeably more ornate than anything else hanging in the sun. You ask about it. That someone says is a wedding tunic. Wedding garments were often family heirlooms, cleaned carefully, stored in reed baskets lined with herbs, and brought out only for the occasion, or sometimes mourned if stained. The one hanging now has been through 5 brides and at least a dozen washings. You run a finger along its edge and feel where old repairs sit like quiet footprints. Your washerwoman nods at it. That one, she says, gets the good natron. As the sun climbs higher, the courtyard begins to shimmer with light. Fabrics flutter, pressed cloth stiffens and warms. It's not a factory, but it is a machine, a human-powered, sun-fueled system of care and labor that keeps everyone from the pharaoh to the fish vendor looking a little less like they rolled through the back of a mud cart. No soap, no machines, no dryer sheets. Just ash, natron patience, and the firm belief that cleanliness is next to godliness, or at the very least, social acceptance. You close your eyes, listening to the rustle of sun-dried linen in the breeze. And slowly everything begins to feel cleaner. You wake the next day to the soft swish of palms brushing stone and the familiar splash of water in basins. But today something different hangs in the air. A shift, a flutter of ceremony. You follow the sound of voices, quieter now, more focused, and find the washerfolk gathered around a bundle wrapped in dark linen. It's not the usual beige or dusty white. This cloth is richer, thicker, and marked with small inked signs along the hem. Sacred symbols. You realize this isn't just another load of laundry. These are priestly garments. Not royal, not exactly, but perhaps just as important. These clothes were worn inside temple walls near the altars in the presence of statues that were believed to hold the breath of gods. And gods, you're learning, do not tolerate dirty robes. You crouch beside a basin as one of the elder women unrolls the garments. They're cream-colored, layered with sleeves so long they drag slightly along the courtyard dust. The moment one touches the ground, someone gasps. It's quickly lifted, dusted, shaken, as though brushing off bad luck. In ancient Egyptian religion, purity wasn't metaphorical. It was physical. It extended from the priest's body to the garments he wore to the very tools he touched. If his robes weren't clean, the god might reject the ritual, or worse, notice him. And so begins the process of laundering what is essentially sacred cloth. The first step isn't washing, it's inspection. Each hem is checked, each fold unfolded with slow, reverent care. Even a small hole, a mist speck of dust, could bring shame, or more practically a tongue lashing from a superior priest. You ask whether these garments are different in fabric. Yes, the head washer says. More threads, thinner weave, softer, like wind spun itself a shirt. You hold one up to the sun and see your fingers through it. The basin is prepared differently this time. The water is drawn from a specific well said to be blessed by a minor river deity. Probably superstition, but no one here is willing to risk otherwise. Into it go flakes of natron, a pinch of crushed lotus root, and something new, ground malachite, just a little for its supposed purification powers. The water glows faintly green in the morning light. Historians still debate whether malachite was ever actually used in laundry. Some say it was reserved for cosmetics or protective charms. Others believe small amounts may have been added during ritual purification rites, laundry included. The evidence is fragmented like most things wrapped in 4,000 years of sand. What's clear is that for this group, the sacred and the sudsy walk hand in hand. The priestly garments are handled with folded linen strips, never bare fingers. They're soaked gently, then lifted and turned like bread dough, never wrung, never beaten. Each movement is slow, even meditative. And all the while someone chants. It's not loud, it's a whisper, soft and repetitive. You catch only pieces. Clean hands, clean words, clean cloth. The god sees through stain and sin alike. You ask about the chant. One washer nods. It's old, she says. My grandmother's grandmother sang it before every temple wash. Another smiles and adds, if you forget the chant, the robe forgets how to be clean. You're not sure that's technically true, but the idea is oddly comforting. Once the garments are rinsed, they're dried, not in the open courtyard, but under a shaded canopy strung with palm leaves. Direct sun, they say, can fade the sacred markings. They pat the fabric with flat palms, smoothing it like a sleeping cat, folding it into precise geometric shapes that look less like laundry and more like origami for the gods. One young woman carefully draws a tiny symbol, a kind of protective eye on the corner of a hem, with a dab of soot and oil. It will wash out next time, but for now it stays, a blessing, or perhaps just a reminder that even the gods expect you to fold your laundry properly. You notice that none of the washerfolk wear bright colors today, just plain tunics, belts tucked tight. Their hair is bound back, and their hands move with the quiet grace of a ritual long practiced. There's reverence here, but also routine. These people have done this before. They know the rules. They know which crease must be pressed, which edge folded inward, which sleeve placed last. They work not for reward, but because this is what must be done. You glance at the clean garments now resting in a row of reed baskets lined with mint leaves. The scent is fresh, sharper than you expect, with a hint of something cooling, perhaps camphor. You ask, and one of the women grins. To keep the moths out, she says, and the spirits from getting too interested. You're starting to understand, laundry here isn't just domestic, it's spiritual. It's a line between the visible and invisible worlds. A daily act that keeps chaos is fed at bay. And when the high priest walks through the temple, his robes white and smooth, the hem brushing sacred stone, he probably doesn't think of the women crouched in this courtyard, rubbing the stains of breakfast figs and dusty sandals from his tunic. But they remember, and they'll be here tomorrow and the next day, smoothing and folding, whispering to the cloth, so that when he stands before the gods, his robes will whisper too. Clean, pure. Ready? The midday heat arrives not as a surprise, but as a certainty. The sun hammers the stone walls, casting short, sharp shadows, and the breeze takes on a toasted edge. Everyone slows down except the laundry. The workers shift to a new task, now stain removal, and not just the casual rinse and wring variety. This is the heavy-duty stuff. The mystery smudges, the aggressive oil blots, the streaks of something red that no one wants to identify too closely. You're handed a kilt with a dark patch near the hem. You tilt it in the light. It looks suspiciously like wine, or maybe crushed beetle shell, or both. Someone shrugs. Festival season, they say. Welcome to Stain Warfare 1250 BCE edition. The washerwoman next to you brings out a small wooden tray lined with pots and bowls. It looks less like a laundry kit and more like an alchemist's starter set. There's no universal stain remover here. Each mixture is custom designed for the offense at hand. She starts with the most classic blend natron paste mixed with chalk powder and a dab of vinegar. This one's for general grime, sweat dust, river mud. She applies it with a reed brush, working in tiny circles while humming under her breath. For oil stains, usually from food or cosmetics, she turns to something stranger, crushed lotus seeds mixed with bitter almond extract. It smells faintly of crushed grass and regret. She applies it sparingly, lets it sit, then gently scrapes it off with the edge of a polished oyster shell. You try the technique yourself, a little too enthusiastically. The shell slips, a tiny nick in the cloth. The washer winces and fixes it immediately with a smooth thumb press and a muttered prayer to Tate, the goddess of weaving. You decide to sit back and observe instead. Another woman approaches a cloth with what looks like ink-deep black right across the chest. Scribe's accident, someone explains. The solution, a soaking mixture of sour beer, mud ash, and brace yourself goat milk. She doesn't explain why. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were widespread or if every laundry crew had their own local secrets. Some ingredients appear in ancient medical papyri lotus, root fig, vinegar barley paste, but whether these were used on cloth or just on skin remains a scholarly tug of war. What's clear is that stain removal wasn't seen as separate from laundering. It was a part of the process, deliberate, patient, sometimes experimental. People took it seriously. After all, clothes weren't disposable. You didn't toss a tunic just because you spilled honey on it. You fixed it. And sometimes the stains weren't even literal. A young woman carefully unrolls a ceremonial cloth with a faint rust-colored blotch on it. Blood, she whispers. Not from injury, from ritual, a sacrifice. The robe belonged to a temple aide who handled offerings. Removing blood is a solemn business. The cloth is treated with pomegranate peel ash, both an astringent and a purifying agent. It's soaked overnight, not in the main basin, but in a side jar set aside for spiritual impurities. The next morning, the robe will be rinsed with water that has sat under starlight. No one touches the water directly. No jokes are made. You learn that stain removal here is part chemistry, part spirituality, part gossip. While the mixture works, it's magic. Women sit nearby and exchange stories. This one says an elder washer pointing to a particularly stubborn patch came from a young man who tried to impress a girl by carrying too many wine jars. He dropped 3. 4, someone corrects. You smile. Laundry has memory. A boy rushes in, clutching a kilt with a sticky-looking purple smear. Buries, you think, or possibly die. The washer takes it with a groan. Again, she asks. He shrugs. Climbed the wrong tree. He's sent to fetch water. Probably as punishment, maybe as tradition. The garments once treated are gently rinsed and laid out on the sunniest part of the courtyard. Not to dry yet, but to bleach. Sunlight here is a tool, not a nuisance. The heat, the UV, the dry air, they all help lift the last traces of stain. Or at least fade them enough to pretend they were never there. Some pieces are pinned to wide ceramic platters, their edges stretched taut with little bone hooks. This solar bleaching can take hours, even days for the toughest marks. But it works, slowly, softly, naturally. One washer lifts a robe, eyes it critically, and nods. Good enough, she says. It's a high compliment. You wander to the side of the courtyard and find a row of washed, dried garments still bearing the faint ghost of old stains. No one tries to hide them. They're memories now. A splashed tunic from the barley harvest, a handprint in oil on a child's robe, a mark shaped like a cat's paw somehow on the back of a priest's ceremonial cloak. Stains, one woman tells you, are just stories we haven't scrubbed away. You sit quietly watching as the last mixture is brushed onto a pair of work trousers and the smell of ash and chalk drifts into the breeze. The light shifts, the cloth glows faintly, and somewhere a child giggles as they try to fold a garment twice their size. And though the stains may fade, the hands that scrub them remain steady. Steady as the Nile. As the afternoon winds down, the courtyard enters a quieter rhythm. The splash of water softens. The conversations grow low and lazy. But above you, the laundry lines are suddenly alive, rows of garments flapping in the dry desert air like sleepy flags in slow motion. Drying isn't just the final step in laundering here. It's a process in itself, nearly ceremonial and full of unspoken rules. You're handed a woven basket of clean, damp tunics, their folds still clinging together, the fabric cool against your arms. Your job is simple, carry them to the drying line. But where to hang them, and how is anything but simple? You approach the lines, sturdy reeds strung between tall posts reinforced with knotted flax cords, and already you sense a territorial logic at play. Whites on one side, underdresses toward the back. Anything with ritual use gets its own stretch of shade-dappled rope. The woman beside you taps your shoulder. No overlap, she warns, gently repositioning your crooked hanging attempt. Sun must touch every inch. You look up. The sun is a silent overseer now inching westward across the pale blue sky. Its light has power here, sterilizing, brightening, stiffening. Clothes hung in the wrong position might dry patchy or worse, retain moisture that breeds mold. In this climate, mold is a kind of ancient sin. Each garment is shaken first, not just to remove creases, but also you're told to chase out any lingering spirits of filth. It's probably metaphorical. Probably. Then comes pinning, not the spring-loaded clips you know, but carved wooden sticks with ridged tips or sometimes braided palm fronds tied in clever loops. You learn fast not to let sleeves dangle or hems drag. Laundry once cleaned must not recontaminate itself. Some women use stones, flat pieces of limestone laid across the edges of heavier cloth to keep them from flying off in sudden gusts. Others stretch smaller garments on reed mats laid flat across rooftops weighted with clay jars at each corner. From above, the city must look like a quilt, every rooftop a patch of color, motion, and method. You climb the short stairs to the house's roof and squint into the glare. Up here, the breeze is steady and the cloth dries faster. The rooftop lines are reserved for smaller, lighter items, headcloths, loin wraps, linen scarves. They flap like tiny ghosts in the wind. A boy nearby is turning a tunic every few minutes, flipping it like a cake on a griddle. His grandmother watches approvingly from the shade. There's an art to the dry, she says. You flip too soon, you crease. You flip too late, you bake it stiff. You touch one already drying. It's hot, not warm hot. The sun here is relentless, and linen responds with a crackle that makes your fingertips twitch. You remember your washerwoman saying how fabric straight off the line can be sharp? You thought she meant metaphorically. Now you're not so sure. Below you in the courtyard, a girl is crouched by a pile of damp garments, sniffing each one in turn. She's not checking for stains. She's checking for smell. Laundry here is judged by the nose. A musty tunic can mean the water wasn't changed fast enough. A sour scarf might hint at overuse of beer paste. And heaven help you if a ceremonial robe carries the faint whiff of yesterday's fish stew. To avoid such disasters, some women sprinkle crushed mint or fenugreek seeds into the final rinse. Others fan garments as they dry, using strips of palm to keep air circulating. The goal isn't perfume, it's neutrality. Clean should smell like nothing. Historians still debate whether perfume was used directly on laundered garments. There's evidence of scented oils and incense in temples and tombs, but everyday clothing, less clear. One papyrus suggests priests used kefai, a sweet incense blend, to fumigate cloth, but scholars aren't sure if that was spiritual or olfactory housekeeping. You glance at a tunic fluttering near the courtyard gate. It's small, patched at the collar, clearly a child's. A cat is curled beneath it, pawing lazily at its shadow. You half expect the cat to start folding. Nearby, someone's singing again. A low rhythmic tune about linen drying like sails of the gods. You wonder if it's a metaphor or if some clever sailor actually strung his laundry across a ship's mast once and turned it into mythology. The sun begins to dip lower shadows, stretching long and lean across the courtyard. The garments once heavy and sodden are now crisp and light, fluttering proudly in the warm dusk wind. You help pull a few down from the line, folding them as you were taught, corners, square, pleats aligned, nothing bunched or balled. The washerwoman checks your work. She gives you a nod. High praise. Some pieces are stacked neatly into reed baskets, ready for return. Others are tucked into storage jars, lined with cedar shavings, ready for next week, next month, maybe next season. There's a sense of satisfaction here, not just that the laundry is done, but that it's done properly. Not rushed, not skipped. Every step from basin to breeze has meaning. And now, as the last tunic is folded and the final peg is pulled from the line, the courtyard grows still. Clothesline shadows sway across the walls. The air smells of dried linen and distant cooking fires. A bird chirps, once then goes silent. And the only sound left is the quiet whisper of cloth cooling in woven baskets, fresh clean, and ready for whatever dust, sweat, wine, and goat disasters tomorrow will bring. You wake to the feeling of warmth, sun filtering in through a slit in the wall, casting soft gold across the courtyard floor. The laundry lines are empty now, gently swaying in the breeze like they're stretching before a long day's work. Today you're tasked with a very particular job, not washing, not rinsing, not drying. Ironing. Well, what passes for ironing in ancient Egypt? Because while there are no flat irons, no heat presses, or fancy boards, that doesn't mean people just walked around in crumpled tunics. Far from it. Linen here was expected to be smooth creased, and in some cases even pleated, a kind of visual poetry written into cloth. You sit down beside a washerwoman who's already begun. Before her is a short stone slab, blackened, smooth, slightly warm from the sun. She lays out a fresh tunic, still slightly damp from its final rinse. She doesn't flatten it so much as coax it into shape, pressing her palms down, slowly guiding the fibers like she's calming a fussy child. No heated tools, just friction and patience. The slab is known as a smoothing stone. Some wealthier households have them carved specially round-edged, perfectly flat, dark basalt or polished limestone. But even a good flat roof tile can do the job in a pinch. She reaches for a tool, something between a paddle and a pestle, carved from olive wood, polished smooth by years of hands and linen. With it, she gently rubs across the fabric's surface, not back and forth, but in long, slow arcs. You watch the creases soften beneath her touch. The cloth almost sighs. Too hard, she warns, and you crush the weave. Too soft, and it forgets to lie flat. You try. Your first pass leaves a wrinkle worse than the original. She laughs kindly and takes over again. You ask how this practice started. She shrugs. The gods like neatness. Fair enough. Historians still argue whether this was a domestic invention or a temple-born necessity. Some tomb paintings depict women smoothing cloth with flat stones, but others hint at even earlier techniques involving weighted ropes or shell tools. The truth, as always, probably lived in many forms at once. The truly tricky part, pleats. Pleated linen was a fashion statement among nobles and priests alike. Rows upon rows of delicate folds running down robes, headcloths, even girdles. But how did they do it without heat, without starch? The answer lies in dampness pressure and a kind of linen origami that makes your brain hurt just watching it. Two women are folding a long robe, now pleating it one crease at a time by pinching the fabric, folding it, and then laying narrow strips of wood on top to weigh it down. The robe is left in the shade too much sun, and the folds relax. After several hours, they remove the weights and gently smooth the edges with their palms. It looks like something a high priest would wear to float 3 inches off the ground. You ask how long it took to learn. Years, one replies, or a good bribe to your aunt. There's also a technique involving twisting damp cloth tightly, then letting it dry in coils. When unrolled, it leaves behind fine crinkles less formal than pleats, but elegant in their own right. You test it on a scrap of leftover linen. It works. Kind of. It also looks like a tiny tornado ate your laundry. You decide to keep practicing. One washerwoman shows you a decorative scarf with sun pleats formed by folding the cloth and laying it in the path of early morning sun, turning it every hour. The sun teaches the cloth to remember, she says. You realize that ironing here is less about precision and more about persuasion. The linen is alive in a way. It remembers its folds, it resists change, and it rewards patience. A dog pads through the courtyard, tail wagging, trailing a flattened scarf. No one stops him. He's checking the crease, someone jokes. Another washer is inspecting a tunic meant for a minor official. It has a decorative collar starched into shape with clay dust and water applied in thin layers and scraped away once dry. A delicate operation. You marvel at how, even with no modern tools, they've managed to invent starch, steam, and structure from scratch. Nearby, someone lays out a ceremonial sash and dusts it lightly with chalk powder. Not for stiffness, but to brighten the white. The chalk will be shaken out later. For now, it gives the cloth a ghostly shimmer. You ask whether anyone ever just didn't bother with all this. Oh sure, one woman shrugs. You can skip the smoothing. But then people think you were attacked by a sack of laundry. Reputation, it seems, is as fragile as a fold. By late afternoon, the courtyard is quiet again. The sun is lower now, and the final garments rest in neat, crisp stacks, folded, pressed, ready. You run a hand over the pile. The linen feels like parchment, and silk's low-budget cousin smooth, but with just enough grain to remind you it was once a stalk of flax in a muddy field. You smile. Your own tunic is crumpled and damp forgotten somewhere by the basin. But these are perfect. The washerwoman stretches, cracks her knuckles, and surveys her work. That's enough begging linen for one day, she says. You laugh, knowing she means it affectionately, or at least half affectionately. Because in Egypt you don't iron, you negotiate with cloth. A new morning hums awake, and with it comes the clatter of reed pens and the low murmur of counting. Today's focus isn't scrubbing or smoothing, it's keeping track. Because when laundry becomes this complicated, this ritualized, this relentless, someone needs to be the one who knows which loincloth belongs to which temple assistant who wore the red-striped sash last Thursday, and which apron still smells faintly of fish. You sit cross-legged beside a scribe, a wiry man with ink-stained fingertips, and the expression of someone who's memorized 1,000 hymns and still doesn't trust a single one. Before him lies a battered wooden tablet covered in neatly inked hieratic, the cursive shorthand of the ancient Egyptian world. This, he says without looking up, is the linen census. You raise an eyebrow. He dips his pen in a tiny pot of black ink and continues scratching out symbols. Every item has an owner, a status, a condition, a location. If it tears, I record it. If it's stained, I note how. If it disappears... He pauses, glancing up. Well, best if it doesn't. He gestures to a stack of ostraca, those flat limestone shards that serve as the Egyptian version of sticky notes. Each one bears short lists, tunics, return cloths withheld for repair items condemned to rags. You pick one up and read. 3 tunics, one with hole at left seam, 2 linen belts, discolored smells of beer. Kilt official, repleated, returned. Even laundry has paperwork. Of course it does. You follow the scribe's gaze toward the far end of the courtyard where a linen storeroom sits partially open. Inside, rows of garments are stacked and labeled well sort of. Each is folded around a colored tag, a tuft of dyed wool, or a knotted reed cord. Some even have a little clay seal dangling from a twine loop. A makeshift barcode system 3,000 years early. You ask how long garments are kept. Depends, he replies. Temple cloth rotated every 3 days. Worker kilts until they give up. Festival robes once a season. Wedding tunics. He trails off, smirking. Let's just say the bride changes faster than the cloth. Historians still puzzle over how formalized this tracking system was. Papyrus records from Thebes and Deir el-Medina include garment counts, repair tallies, and even disputes about stolen belts. But whether each household managed its own version or relied on professional scribes is up for debate. What's clear is that in temples and palaces, linen was asset management, especially when it came to ritual items. The scribe stands now, stretching his back. He walks over to a low table and picks up a rectangular tablet covered in chalk marks, today's repair ledger. Another washerwoman sits beside him, with a needle made from fishbone and a ball of twisted flax thread. Together, they review the patients. Robe with torn hem from tripping during incense processional. Child's tunic missing ties blamed on a goat. Belt stretched beyond use, no one wants to name names. You're handed a robe to inspect, a thin one soft from age with a rip under one sleeve. You notice 3 tiny dots near the edge stitched there deliberately, a code. 1 dot means first repair, 3. You're on thin fabric, buddy. It's a quiet joke, but the system is real. In some homes, repairs are marked so owners know whether the garment is being mended or replaced. In wealthier households, scribes track how many repairs a cloth has undergone. At some point, patching becomes more expensive than weaving new. But for most, the patch is the pride. A well-mended tunic says you care, or at least that you're not wasteful, throwing away cloth without repurposing it. That's for people with too much silver and not enough sense. You sit beside the repairwoman watching as she loops her bone needle through a worn collar. The movement is hypnotic. In-out pull, in-out pull. She doesn't measure, her hands know the distance. Beside her is a darning stone, a rounded bit of clay she slips inside sleeves and waistbands to keep the cloth taut as she stitches. It's worn smooth like river stone, probably older than she is. You try your hand at a simple seam. Your thread tangles immediately. She gently takes it back, rethreads it, and mutters something that sounds like a blessing but might also be a sarcastic curse. Hard to tell. At the far edge of the courtyard, another washer is counting bundles. Each pile represents a person, a household, a task. Some are wrapped in faded blue cloth, others in brown or tied with papyrus twine. You notice she's using a tally stick, notched carefully with each item, then bundled together and stored in a clay jar near the doorway. Records are everywhere here, not just ink but texture shape habit. You begin to notice how one woman always folds tunics in the same 5-crease pattern, how one child ties drying cloth with a specific triple knot. These aren't quirks, they're signatures. As the morning stretches on, you help file a few more items, folding them with a reverence that's starting to feel automatic. A robe for the scribe, a tunic for a temple singer, a scarf for a baker's wife who it's said has the cleanest laundry in the city and the sharpest tongue to go with it. At last the scribe leans back satisfied. Everything accounted for, he says. Today no one's missing a hem. You exhale slowly, realizing how much effort goes into keeping the chaos from fraying. It's not just about clean clothes, it's about memory, order, continuity. About making sure that when someone reaches for their tunic in the morning, it's not just clean, it's known. And in a world ruled by gods, heat, and dust, sometimes a well-folded robe is the closest thing to peace. By now you're starting to recognize them before they speak. The priest's clean-shaven, quiet-footed faces like they've never so much as seen dust. They arrive at the courtyard's edge just as the sun tilts overhead, bringing with them another load of laundry that isn't just clothing, it's commandment in cotton form. These robes must be washed twice daily, twice. Not because they're stained, not because they've seen use, but because ritual law demands it. You blink. Didn't you just wash that exact garment this morning? Yes, one of the washerwomen sighs, and we'll wash it again at sundown. Welcome to the priesthood of clean robes, where staying pure means laundering your body and your clothes in almost equal measure. In ancient Egyptian temples, priests went through multiple purification rituals each day. These included bathing, abstaining from certain foods, and yes, wearing freshly laundered linen before each sacred duty. You weren't allowed to walk into the presence of a god statue smelling like last night's dinner. Or anything, really. The result, a never-ending laundry cycle for anyone tasked with maintaining temple garments. You help unfold one of the robes. It's so light it practically floats. The fabric is whisper-thin and you wonder how long it would take to tear just by breathing too hard on it. And yet here it is, flawless, bright, untouched by earthly grime, at least until the next priest sneezes. You watch as two washerwomen begin the process not with haste, but with practiced reverence. The robe is rinsed in purified water, then rubbed with a natron mix more diluted than usual. No strong ash paste here, nothing coarse. This fabric is woven for the gods, not goats. Nearby, a young apprentice priest watches arms folded. You wonder if he's there to make sure the robe is properly treated, or just to escape a boring incense duty. You ask the washer how many robes a priest goes through in a day. 3, sometimes 5, she shrugs, depends how holy he wants to feel. Some historians believe these frequent changes were linked to the symbolic death and rebirth cycle Egyptians loved so much, each robe like a fresh skin shed and replaced. Others suggest it was part of an elaborate sensory discipline: stay clean, stay focused, stay worthy. Whatever the reason, it's your hands now rinsing a cloth so thin it threatens to float away. As you wring it gently, very gently, you hear a splash behind you. A child has dropped a basket of folded temple scarves into a rinse basin. The gasp that escapes the nearest washerwoman could probably be heard in the Valley of the Kings. But no one yells, not really. They just scoop up the scarves, set them aside, and start over. Because sacred laundry waits for no one. A separate drying line is erected for these robes, shaded by palm fronds. Sunlight is good, but not too much. Faded cloth doesn't reflect purity, and a crispy collar on a sacred sash that's grounds for serious side-eye. One washer takes a small, flat copper scraper, not sharp, more like a tongue depressor, and carefully removes a bit of temple wax from the hem of a sash. No detergent, just pressure, patience, and a prayer. She glances at you. You ever try cleaning incense out of linen? You wisely shake your head. You help fold another robe, smoothing it into perfect thirds before sliding it into a reed-lined temple basket, its interior scented with myrrh and lined with a layer of thin, clean fabric. Yes, even the storage container gets dressed. As the basket closes, another priest arrives. New robe, new request. Is this a third robe today? You ask, your voice low. So the washer just chuckles. Third for now. You're told of one infamous priest who demanded 7 changes a day, one for each stage of the sun's journey. Morning robe, midday robe, afternoon robe, pre-sunset robe, sunset robe, after sunset purification robe, midnight lunar robe. You stare. He didn't last long, she adds. Too much laundry, not enough offerings. One of the washerwomen points out the tiny stitches in the shoulder seam of a ceremonial tunic, hieroglyphs sewn into the cloth meant to protect the wearer. Bless the ritual, or maybe just remind the gods who wore it last time. You can barely make them out, but they're there, tiny zigzags and loops like whispers etched in thread. It makes you wonder, does the god notice when a robe is patched when it's one pleat short of symmetry, when the left sleeve is half a handbreadth longer than the right? Or do they simply trust the washerfolk to handle it? As the final robe is placed in its basket, the apprentice priest bows. The god thanks you, he says. The washerwoman raises an eyebrow. Does he also thank us for washing your breakfast tunic? He grins and retreats. The sacred robes are carried out back through the narrow alleyways toward the temple compound. Their white folds wrapped tight shoulders, squared invisible prayers stitched into every crease. You exhale the scent of natron clinging to your fingers. Around you, more cloth is soaking more garments, wait to be folded, more sacred linen is on its way. And the cycle continues. Clean. Ritual. Again, the afternoon heat settles like a slow-moving blanket over the city, turning the air syrupy, making even the shadows feel lazy. But the washerfolk don't rest, not yet. There's another drama unfolding in the courtyard, and it's not about stained tunics or sun-wrinkled pleats. It's about missing laundry. A young woman storms in, clutching the corner of a half-folded kilt. This, she announces, is not my brother's tunic. She says it like she's accusing someone of a crime. Maybe she is. The head washer sighs. You sense this isn't the first wardrobe mix-up of the week. Laundry in ancient Egypt wasn't just about cleaning, it was about accountability. When someone lost a tunic, it wasn't a small matter. These garments represented wealth function and sometimes even inheritance. A well-made kilt could last years, a scarf passed down through generations. To lose one, that was a scandal. The head washer calmly unrolls a few ostraca from the storage shelf, little shards of limestone with handwritten notes. Each bears a laundry list, a tally, or a signed return confirmation. She reads slowly. One tunic white mid-length patch at left seam, one belt green dyed worn, one scarf blue stripe frayed edge. The disputed garment matches none of these. It's clean, but the stitching is wrong, the hem is untagged, and worst of all, it smells faintly of incense, a sure sign it belonged to someone else entirely. The other washerfolk gather subtly, trying not to seem too interested, though you can feel the gossip swirling like sand in a storm. Eventually, a compromise is reached. The tunic will be held re-washed and posted on the temple laundry board. Yes, they have one. If unclaimed by the next festival, it will be reassigned or cut down into handcloths. The young woman departs, still muttering. The washerwoman turns to you and shakes her head. People think laundry is private, but every hem tells a story. She's not wrong. You settle back and listen as the washerfolk swap tales about past laundering crimes. One man accused his neighbor of stealing his wedding robe and replacing it with a cheaper version. A priest once refused a returned tunic because it came back with a small yellow stain and claimed the gods would strike him down if he wore it. A household scribe famously miscounted a shipment of temple cloth and had to pay compensation in grain and 2 clay jars of beer. Serves him right, one woman snorts. No one trusts a scribe who folds like a donkey. Historians have discovered records of laundry disputes written into legal documents. Some even show up in court scrolls arguments over cloth weight quality and wear. In one text, a man was fined 5 deben of copper for falsely accusing a laundry worker of theft. Another recounts an argument between 2 washermen over who had the right to scrub a particularly ornate sash. Too many hands ruin the hem, the saying goes. You realize now that laundry here isn't a solitary affair. It's communal, interpersonal, and deeply political. Every garment represents trust. Every basin of rinse water, a potential betrayal. There's a sense of surveillance, too. Not sinister, but unavoidably thorough. Everyone sees everything. If a tunic comes back with a new patch, someone notices. If a scarf smells like the wrong perfume, eyebrows are raised. It's not uncommon for washerfolk to gossip about their clients. One woman recounts how she knew a nobleman's marriage was in trouble when his wife's robe came back alone for 3 days straight. Another claims she can tell who's cheating by checking for duplicate hem folds a signature only a lover would make, not a servant. You ask if they keep secrets. Of course, one washer says, but only the interesting ones. Then there are the mystery garments. Every now and then, a robe or tunic appears in a basket with no name, no marker, no known owner. It's washed, it's folded, it's set aside. And if no one claims it after a week or two, it's repurposed, cut down into baby wraps, temple rag cloths, or traded for thread. One such item is held up now, a beautiful white sash with embroidered lotus petals along the edge. No one knows where it came from. It's too fine for a laborer, too plain for a priest, too short for an official. Maybe it was never worn, someone whispers. Maybe it was a gift left behind. You find yourself staring at the hem, wondering about its story. Who stitched it? Who lost it? Who's missing it now? Laundry is evidence of joy, of shame, of routine. It records what we try to forget. And in a city as interconnected as Thebes, a misplaced belt can ripple outward like a stone in water. The day grows long. The sun stretches out a sleepy cat across the sky. And still the washerfolk fold and sort, muttering about names, stories, smells, and stitches. You help tag the next bundle, 2 tunics, 1 belt, 1 scarf. You double-check the knots, triple-check the fabric pattern. You don't want to be the next laundry scandal, because here even your hem has witnesses. You're sitting on a low step now, elbows on your knees, watching the sun cast long slats of shadow across the courtyard walls. There's a stillness settling in, not the end of work, but the pause between rounds. The deep inhale before the rinse basins are refilled and the goat returns to investigate the laundry lines again. A woman taps you lightly on the shoulder. Come, she says, you haven't seen the washerman's village yet. You blink. A whole village? She laughs. Where do you think all this linen goes to dry itself? You follow her through narrow alleys, past rows of quiet homes with reed mats rolled up beside doors and rows of sandals left in neat identical pairs. The hum of the city fades behind you, replaced by the trickle of water through ditches and the low buzz of insects under tamarisk trees. And then you see it just beyond a bend in the path, nestled between a rise of baked earth and a wide, flat field of hanging lines and clay vats. The washerman's village, a cluster of modest homes, low workshops, and reed-covered drying areas, all organized around one shared purpose: laundry. You've walked into the dry cleaner district of 3,000 years ago. This isn't a place for ritual robes or embroidered sashes. This is where the heavy-duty, all-day, everyday laundering happens. Here, the kilts of stonecutters, the aprons of bread makers, the linens from hostels and kitchens and storage rooms all converge to be scrubbed, soaked, and restored. Children dart between lines strung with towels. Dogs nap under vats of rinse water. Everywhere people are hauling bundles, pouring buckets, wringing cloth, and laughing through mouths stained with date syrup. You pass a workshop where 2 older men are boiling water in enormous clay pots. Inside each pot, thick linens bubble like soup. They're stirred with long reed poles, occasionally lifted out and slapped against flat wooden benches. Steam rises like incense, and the smell is strange, sour beer, ash, sweat, and a pinch of something herbal. Secret recipe, one of the men grins. Passed down from my grandmother's worst neighbor. You pass stone platforms where thick garments are laid flat to dry under a wooden grate that filters the sun. These aren't delicate tunics, they're storage cloths, packing linens, and temple sacks. All cleaned by hand, soaked in sun, and guarded by cats. Lots of cats. One of the most striking features here is the efficiency. Everyone knows their role. One team handles soaking, another wrings, a third folds. Even the children have their jobs: untangling ropes, shooing birds, fanning wet garments to keep the air moving. The sense of community is unmistakable. You see no scribes here, no ledgers. The work is tracked through voice memory rhythm. If a tunic goes missing, the entire courtyard seems to know within the hour. If a robe tears, 3 neighbors show up with thread before the complaint even finishes forming. You step into one of the small, reed-covered huts at the edge of the village. Inside, bundles of cloth are stacked high on shelves made from palm wood and mud brick. Each bundle is tied with a different colored cord: green for temple work, red for officials, plain flax for merchants. You ask how they keep it all straight. We know. One woman shrugs. We always know. And you believe her. There's something magical about the memory held in this place, not in scrolls or ostraca, but in hands. Hands that remember the tear in a particular apron, the extra fold in a specific sash. Hands that have washed the same tunic for the same baker every 3rd day since before his beard came in properly. You sit for a while watching one family team prepare a batch of incoming laundry. They dump the garments onto a wide reed mat and begin to sort by weight, not color. Heavier cloth needs longer soaking. Lighter cloth gets priority. Every now and then, someone finds a coin or a bead or a prayer token tucked into a fold. These are placed gently into a bowl to be returned later. No pockets here, but lots of hiding places. Historians still debate how specialized these laundry villages were, whether they were formal guilds, temple-affiliated labor groups, or simply tight-knit communities of tradespeople. But many agree that washermen held a curious spot in Egyptian society: necessary, skilled, trusted, yet rarely elevated. They cleaned the robes of priests, the linens of nobles, the bed sheets of scribes, and the sashes of mourners, and yet their names rarely appear in official records. That said, at least one tomb inscription praises a man named Knumetep, washer of linen for the House of the Ram, whose hands never missed a pleat, a legacy if there ever was one. As the afternoon shadows lengthen, you help carry a bundle to the rinsing station. It's heavier than you expect, soaked and folded like wet clay. 2 children pass you giggling, balancing damp tunics on their heads like hats. One calls out, "Don't drop the god's socks, you almost trip." By the time you return to the path back to town, the washerman's village is glowing in the low sunlight, clothes fluttering like sails in a still harbor, the rinse water reflecting strips of sky. A woman waves to you, holding up a tunic with a hole the size of a palm. "Come back tomorrow," she says. "You can help us convince this one to stay together." And you realize laundry may fade, threads may fray, but the washerman's village, it endures. You return to the courtyard just as the sun begins its descent behind the rooftops. The air is cooler now, but the heat clings to the walls rising off the stone like a ghost reluctant to leave. Waiting for you by the rinse basin is something different, not a pile of everyday tunics or dusty temple scarves. It's blood-stained linen, and not from an accident with a reed cutter or a child's scraped knee. No, this cloth smells of oil resin and something sacred. This came from the altar, a washer says quietly, a sacrifice cloth. You blink. You didn't realize it was even possible to launder something that's been near blood and gods in equal measure. She dips the cloth slowly into a separate basin, one that hasn't been used all day. Its water is cool, still almost reflective, and sitting on the ledge beside it is a bowl of fine sand, crushed pomegranate rind, and a dried palm frond curled like a question mark. Because cleaning sacred stains is a ritual all its own. In temples across Egypt, sacrifices, usually animals, occasionally symbolic offerings, were made as part of major festivals and ceremonies. The linens used in these events were never discarded casually. They were often washed and ritually purified, then stored, reused, or sometimes buried alongside sacred objects, but not before a very specific cleansing took place. First, the washerwoman lays the cloth flat against a polished stone slab, not for scrubbing, but for assessment. The blood is dried dark, it's spread uneven. You're told that the pattern matters. Some priests believe it's a message. Others say it's just a matter of identifying the animal used in the rite. You don't ask which answer is more unsettling. Next, she scoops the crushed pomegranate rind, bitter astringent red as old brick, and gently rubs it over the stain. The juice, she says, helps loosen the blood and also serves a symbolic purpose, like cleansing with blood to remove blood and ancient reversal. Historians still argue over whether these rituals were practical or purely spiritual. Was the pomegranate chosen for its cleaning power or its color? Was the sand for abrasion or sanctification? Or both? As always, Egypt's logic weaves function and faith into one indelible thread. Once the pomegranate paste is applied, she rinses it off using infused water, a cold mix steeped with lotus petals and juniper shavings left overnight in a sealed clay jar. The smell is faint, floral, earthy. The linen begins to look less like evidence, more like fabric again. Then comes the drying, not in the open air, but beneath a reed canopy shielded from public view. Sacred cloth isn't to be stared at like a merchant's towel. It dries in shadow as if privacy were part of the purification. While the cloth rests, a young apprentice prepares a ritual rinse. He crushes blue lotus petals into a bowl of warm water and stirs slowly, muttering a verse you can't catch. The liquid turns cloudy. He doesn't pour it over the cloth, but rather dips a second linen strip thin as gauze and presses it gently along the edge of the newly cleaned garment, like blessing the edges. This, the washerwoman says, is the last touch. The cloth remembers who it served. You wonder whether people ever refuse to wash sacred stained garments. Sometimes she admits, if the rite was too strong, if the blood runs the wrong way. You ask what that means. She just shrugs. Later, she shows you a small chest hidden beneath a pile of mending threads. Inside are strips of cloth too marked to be washed. Some still carry faint stains. These aren't burned or discarded. They're kept stacked carefully and used only in funerary rites or wrapped around temple idols on feast days. You hold one of them in your hands. It's soft light and carries a scent like frankincense and sun. You swear it's warmer than it should be. Not all sacred laundry is returned. Some is retired, offered back to the gods, or used to wrap amulets, line jars, or pad the inner corners of shrines. One washer tells you of a time a particularly torn ceremonial sash was buried in the roots of a sycamore, left as an offering for Hathor. The tree still leans toward the east, she says, like it remembers. As evening deepens, the now clean cloth is removed from its drying spot, folded not into the usual squares, but into a spiral wound from hem to center, then tucked into a basket lined with cedar bark. It will be taken back to the temple before nightfall, used again, prayed over, or maybe set aside for someone's final journey into the tomb. You sit quietly, your fingers still tingling from the scent of lotus and pomegranate. Around you, the sounds of everyday laundry return, buckets, sloshing laughter, rising a faint hiss of cloth against stone. But this moment lingers. Because today you learn that even the sacred can stain, and even the sacred sometimes must be washed clean. The sky turns the color of warm clay as the sun sinks behind the palms, its last light brushing the top of the courtyard wall. The air is still except for the slow flap of a single tunic left swinging gently on the line, forgotten, or perhaps just enjoying one last dance in the breeze. You sit on the edge of the basin legs, dangling arms soar in that satisfying end-of-day way. Around you, the washerfolk have begun the evening rituals, not prayers exactly, but closures, emptying the last of the rinse water, stacking folded cloth, brushing dried natron from the stones. There's no urgency, just peace. The head washer approaches holding a reed basket with the day's final load, the washerfolk's own tunics. Dusty, salt-lined, frayed at the hems. Because even the hands that clean others must be clean themselves. These, she says, are the most stubborn cloths of all. She grins and you understand what she means. These garments aren't embroidered, no perfume rinse, no ceremonial pleats. But they are soaked through with something deeper, the rhythm of work, the shape of muscle, the scent of soap and steam and survival. They're washed like anything else, or perhaps not. The touch is slower, softer. The gestures hold a kind of affection that doesn't need speaking. You help rinse one a tunic with a torn underarm and a small patch of different fabric at the neck. That's mine, one woman says, stitched from my sister's old apron. She couldn't fold a corner, but she made the best fish stew. You all smile. These tunics are dried flat on low planks, folded into compact bundles, and set beside tomorrow's bundles of natron and chalk. They'll be worn again at first light when the sun hits the first robe to be scrubbed and the courtyard fills once more with the low music of movement and water. The last cloth is pressed, the lines are unstrung, the basins are turned upside down to keep out dust and stray cats. And then it's over. Not dramatically, not even noticeably, just still. You sit for a moment longer as the others drift home, their shoulders tired but light. Somewhere in the dark, a child giggles, a clay cup clinks, a donkey complains to the moon. You close your eyes and remember the hiss of hot linen being pressed on stone, the scent of fig and vinegar in a rinse basin, the feel of ink-stained cloth under your hands, the hush that falls before a sacred robe is lifted from the water. You remember the girl folding birth cloths by candlelight, the woman singing over a funeral shroud, the laughter when someone dropped a tunic into the dye vat again. The wind always the wind tugging at sleeves like it had something to say. And you realize something simple, something steady. Laundry is not just what we wear, it's what we carry. It holds the scent of places we've been, the weight of work, the warmth of touch, the salt of sorrow, the laughter of festivals, the hush of final farewells. It is in every fold a kind of memory, and to clean it truly clean, it is not just labor, it's honor. You open your eyes, the courtyard is quiet, just you, the soft glow of coals in the corner hearth, and the smell of soap fading gently into the night. The tunics are folded, the work is done, the stories are safe. Now breathe, stretch your fingers, close your eyes. The linen is still, the gods are quiet, and sleep is near. The courtyard fades into shadow, now every corner softened by dusk. The basin stones, still warm from the day's heat, hold that gentle kind of warmth that hums beneath your skin. The lines sway lazily empty, but for the whisper of memory. Somewhere nearby, someone hums a low, tuneless melody, a song meant not to be heard but felt. Like the brush of clean cloth against skin, like the hush of footsteps on sand. You sit back, let your shoulders loosen, let your breath fall into rhythm with the night. The day is done, the robes are folded, the stains are gone, or maybe just faded enough to forget, and that's all right. Not everything must be spotless, some creases are earned. The air smells faintly of dried mint and wood smoke. You hear the soft hoot of an owl, the distant crackle of a hearth. Far above, stars begin to blink into place like stitches in a sky that's being slowly mended. You are clean, the world is quiet, the night is yours. Let your mind drift now like linen on a breeze. Let go of the list, the effort, the remembering, because tonight the cloth holds no stain. The water is still, the gods are sleeping, and so should you.